The first sign that the fragile heart of the savannah was about to fracture wasn't a sight, but a sound. It wasn't the rustle of grass beneath hooves or the flap of wings in the distance. No, it was a raw and guttural, a cry of agony that clawed its way through the tranquil air like a dagger tearing silk. It was a sound so ancient, so primal, that it seemed to rise not just from a single throat, but from the earth itself, a betrayal, a scream of nature being turned against its own child. The air, moments before so serene, seemed to split into shards of tension. At the center of this unraveling scene stood not just an animal, but a king, a magnificent silverback gorilla, a monarch of the wild whose presence carried the weight of generations. But now that king was shackled, engulfed in the suffocating embrace of a predator as old as the soil it slithered upon, a giant python. The once placid waterhole erupted into chaos, a storm of thrashing limbs, churning froth, each splash a drumbeat of survival. The serpent's coils, thick as ancient branches and patterned with the artistry of the earth, tightened like the merciless grip of death. The gorilla's mouth opened wide, not in command, but in torment, his roar tearing the heavens in half as he fought with every fiber of his being against the crushing bands of muscle. And from the shadowed edge of this terrifying arena, a lone figure trembled. A man, camera trembling in his hands, knelt as if praying to capture a moment that both defied and defined existence itself. Each frame seared into his lens was no longer just a photograph. It was testimony to the fragile line between life and death, between power and despair. "Earth is the Lord, and everything in it," whispered the wind through the tall grass, as if to remind both beast and man that even in struggle, they were bound in one eternal story. And in that instant, as the water churned red with desperation, a question rose like thunder. Would this be the final breath of a king, or the first verse of a miracle that would bind humanity and the wild in a way never forgotten? Every great photograph tells a story, but some stories begin long before the shutter clicks. Hours earlier, under the vast, patient sky of the African savannah, that story had begun with a man named Liam. He wasn't just a photographer, he was a pilgrim, a seeker of the poetry written in the language of fur, feather, and fang. His life was not measured in cities or clocks, but in the whispers of wind across golden plains and the gaze of creatures whose eyes carried the wisdom of Eden. That morning, Liam's heart thudded with reverence as he journeyed deeper into the wild, guided by a small team of rangers, guardians of this land, men whose weathered faces bore the dust of decades, and whose knowledge of the savannah's secrets ran deeper than the roots of the ancient acacia trees. Their jeeps carved a red dust ribbon through the grasslands, the rising haze painting the horizon in shades of eternity. Around them, life whispered. Bent grass revealed the path of a zebra herd, a distant call sang of a bird unseen, and tracks in a muddy patch told stories of elephants that had passed in moonlight silence. Each sign was a verse in nature's living scripture. Their destination was the watering holes, liquid sanctuaries where the thirst of life was quenched, where gazelles bent their fragile necks, where elephants mirrored their majesty in the glass of still waters, where survival itself gathered daily. Liam hoped for peace, the gentle descent of a giraffe, awkward and graceful, or the innocent wallowing of warthogs as sunlight softened their laughter. He set up his camera like a surgeon preparing for truth. The air was heavy but still, humming with insects as if time itself held its breath. The rangers stood back, silent sentinels with eyes that scanned not just for danger, but for balance, for they were not just protectors of a man, but of an entire kingdom woven by tooth and root. "Ask the animals and they will teach you, or the birds of the sky and they will tell you," and Liam, though unaware, was living that verse. Each second he waited was prayer, each heartbeat was reverence, and then as if summoned by eternity itself he appeared, the silverback, a mountain of muscle cloaked in shadow, moving with the quiet authority of a monarch surveying his throne. His every step was an anthem, his gaze carried galaxies. Against the gold and green of the savannah, his form was living sculpture. Liam's breath caught, his finger trembling near the shutter. This was it. This was the story of majesty and peace he had come to tell the world. But peace is fragile, and in the cool silence beneath the water's edge, something ancient and patient stirred. The attack was not a warning. It was not a negotiation. It was the explosion of a nightmare, erupting with the speed of lightning. One heartbeat, the gorilla was a king lowering his head to sip from his life-giving throne. The next, the throne itself betrayed him with a fury older than time. The water erupted. The python, a living rope of terror, launched itself from the shallows. Its body, a coil of pure muscle and silence, uncoiled like a spring designed by death itself. Jaws unhinged, it latched onto the gorilla's arm, teeth sinking into flesh with a force meant not to kill, but to anchor. Then came the true weapon, its body. Within seconds, the serpent was no longer an animal. It was an executioner's noose, each coil wrapping tighter, crushing air, snapping ribs, silencing the roar of a king. The gorilla's eyes blazed with defiance, his scream of fury rising not just from his throat, but from the heart of creation. Liam's camera clicked, freezing eternity into frames. His body trembled with helplessness. He was not just watching a struggle, he was watching the wild itself torn in two. The rangers stood rigid, their eyes grim, their hands clenched like stone. They knew the law written not in ink but in blood. Humans do not interfere in battles between titans. To step forward would be death, not only for them, but for the fragile respect they bore for the balance of this world. This was no mere battle. This was philosophy made flesh, brute force against willpower, silence against voice, serpent against king. And with every breath the gorilla exhaled, the serpent stole more ground, coils tightening like the hand of inevitability. Liam's finger pressed the shutter, but his heart screamed. The gorilla's veins bulged, his massive arms clawing, his body straining to tear steel that could not be torn. And yet, even in that abyss of suffering, his roar refused to die. His voice echoed into the heavens. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. Was this the end of the king, or the beginning of a miracle that would bind man and beast in a story the world would never forget? The explosive kinetic strength of the silverback versus the suffocating, relentless pressure of the python. It was a clash that seemed almost biblical in its symbolism. Could a creature of flesh, bone, and will ever truly overcome the merciless coils of a reptile designed by nature to strangle life itself? Each second dragged like an eternity, the air trembling with the gorilla's muffled roars as his mighty chest fought against the crushing prison of muscle. The water churned in violent spirals, droplets sparkling in the sun like fragments of shattered hope, and with each passing heartbeat the answer seemed horrifyingly clear. The king of the savannah was losing. The python's grip tightened with mechanical inevitability, and the gorilla's movements slowed as if the weight of the earth itself was bearing down upon him. His breath came in ragged bursts, every exhale stolen by the serpent's coils, every inhale fought for as if it were the last. And yet, in the dark abyss of suffocation, when the body was faltering, something greater stirred. He could no longer rely solely on brute force. He had to reach deeper, beyond muscle, into the realm of intelligence, instinct, and the primal will to live. For even in the wildest battles of survival, there comes a moment when strength must yield to wisdom, and raw power must bow before cunning. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. That verse echoed in spirit as the silverback's dimming eyes flickered with a sudden clarity. The fight was not yet over, and destiny was not ready to let him fall. In the chaos of water and coils, clarity pierced through like a blade of light. As the gorilla's massive frame trembled on the edge of surrender, a desperate opportunity emerged. The serpent's body was armor, unyielding, but its head, its command center, was flesh. With a guttural snarl that seemed to rise from the very core of creation, the silverback made his move. He shifted his weight, leaning back against the muddy resistance beneath him, forcing the python's head into a vulnerable angle. Then, like a storm unleashed, he struck. His powerful canines sank deep into the python's body just behind the skull, puncturing scales and sinew. The serpent convulsed in agony, its coils rippling with sudden weakness. The gorilla did not release. No, he clamped down harder, grinding his teeth into living muscle, every fiber of his body channeling both fury and desperate resolve. A shudder tore through the snake's massive frame. For the first time, the predator was prey. And in that moment of reversal, the gorilla remembered what it meant to be king. His bites were not just retaliation. They were survival carved into the flesh of inevitability. The rangers, standing frozen at the edge of the clearing, could hardly believe what they were witnessing. This was not chaos anymore. This was strategy. This was intent. For the spirit God gave us does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline.